The day it happened, Liam wasn't looking for trouble. He never was. He'd driven 4 hours from CFB Esquimalt to spend his leave week at his sister's place in Kelowna. 14 days off. The first real break he'd had in 19 months. He'd planned to do nothing. Sleep past 6. Drink his coffee on the back deck. Let Scout run in the yard. That was the plan. Scout was 7 years old and had served 2 deployments with Liam before the military retired him from active duty. The paperwork said transition to handler's care. What it really meant was, this dog has given everything, and the only person he trusts is you, so take him home. Liam had signed without hesitating. Scout wasn't a pet. He wasn't a mascot. He was a partner with a service record longer than most corporals Liam had worked with. Bomb detection, building clearance, 2 confirmed saves in Kandahar that never made any official report. Scout didn't need a medal. He didn't need recognition. He just needed Liam nearby and a job to do. On the 3rd day of leave, Liam's sister Priya asked if he wanted to come to the Okanagan Summer Fair. He said no. She made him go anyway. The fairgrounds sat on the eastern edge of Kelowna, just past the vineyard belt where the road started climbing toward the hills. It was the kind of event that existed in every mid-sized Canadian city. Local vendors, a pie competition, a livestock show, in a big canvas tent that smelled like hay and sunscreen. Families with strollers, old men in fishing hats, kids running between booths. Priya's daughter, 6-year-old Maeve, had been talking about it for a week. Liam put Scout on his lead and went. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, jeans, no insignia, nothing that announced what he was or what he'd done. That was habit. That was preference. Most people who'd done what he'd done didn't need anyone to know about it. Scout walked beside him with the quiet authority of a dog, who had never once been startled by a loud noise. They moved through the crowds easily. Scout was trained for exactly this: public spaces, unpredictable movement, children who wanted to touch him. Liam let the kids pet him. Scout sat perfectly still and let them. A few parents took photos. "Is he?" a woman asked. "He's professional," Liam said. The woman laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. The dog show area was set up near the back of the fairgrounds. A temporary ring with white rope barriers and bleacher seating. Maybe 200 people watching. There were maybe 15 dogs entered. A golden retriever, a pair of border collies. A few smaller breeds Liam couldn't name. An announcer with a wireless mic kept things moving with the cheerful, slightly exhausted energy of someone who'd been doing this since 7 in the morning. Liam hadn't planned to stop. Maeve pulled his hand toward the bleachers, and that was that. He sat at the end of a row. Scout lay down at his feet. Priya bought Maeve a lemonade and they settled in. That's when he noticed Claudette. She was hard to miss. Late 40s, expensively dressed in a way that looked slightly wrong for an outdoor fair. Cream blazer, heels on grass, a silk scarf that cost more than most people's car payments. She stood near the competitor area with the posture of someone who expected to be looked at. Her dog was a purebred standard poodle named, Liam heard her say this twice, Versailles. She called it Versailles. The dog was beautiful, Liam would give her that. Perfectly groomed, obviously trained, moving with a kind of practiced elegance. But Claudette treated the animal less like a companion and more like an extension of her reputation. She adjusted its collar, straightened its ribbon, spoke to it in a clipped, corrective voice that carried across the ring whenever the crowd went quiet. Her husband stood slightly behind her and said nothing. Her teenage son sat on a bleacher across the way, phone out, clearly somewhere else entirely. Liam watched this for maybe 4 minutes before he stopped paying attention. Scout had also noticed the poodle, not aggressively. Not just the focused, still attention that military dogs develop, cataloging, assessing, filing it away. He didn't make a sound. He just watched. The junior division ran first. Kids with their dogs moving through basic obedience patterns. A young boy, maybe 10, with a nervous little beagle that sat when it was supposed to sit and stayed when it was supposed to stay, and got a round of applause that was mostly for the effort. Maeve clapped so hard her lemonade sloshed. Then came the open agility trials. The border collies were impressive, precise, locked onto their handlers like they were reading their minds. The golden retriever was charming, slower, but the crowd loved it. Then came an 8-year-old girl named Bea, walking into the ring with a German shepherd that had been clearly trained to an unusual. The announcer said, was Rex. The dog, he was a rescue, Bea explained into the mic in a small, earnest voice, and she'd been training him for 2 years. What happened next was something Liam hadn't expected. Rex ran the course clean. Not just clean, fluid. He took every obstacle without hesitation, turned tight, never broke stride. The crowd came alive. Maeve stood up. Even Priya put down her phone. Liam straightened in his seat. That dog had been trained by someone who knew what they were doing. Not an 8-year-old, not entirely. Someone had put real work into Rex. The announcer announced the score. Rex and Bea were in first place. The applause was loud and genuine. And that's when the afternoon changed. Claudette did not applaud. Liam noticed that first. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression doing something controlled and unpleasant behind very expensive sunglasses. She said something to her husband. He nodded, looking at the ground. Versailles was entered in the next round. The poodle ran well, technically sound, clearly trained, fluid in its own way. But it wasn't Rex. The crowd was polite. The score came back second. Second. The announcer moved on. The event coordinator began setting up for the next trial. Liam was helping Maeve find her jacket when he heard it. A sharp, collective intake of breath from the crowd near the ring. He looked up. Claudette had walked into the space behind the ring. Not the official area, just the grassy corridor between the barrier and the bleachers, where handlers waited with their dogs before their turn. Bea was there with Rex, the blue first-place ribbon just pinned to his collar. A woman who was clearly Bea's mother stood nearby, still beaming. Claudette was speaking to them. Liam couldn't hear the words from where he sat, but he could hear the tone, clipped, certain. The tone of someone accustomed to getting correction acknowledged. Then she reached into bag. She pulled out what looked like a thin leather riding crop. The next part happened fast. She struck Rex across the back, once. Hard. Rex yelped. The sound cut through the fairground noise like a blade. Bea screamed. Her mother grabbed her. Rex scrambled sideways, the ribbon torn from his collar, and backed against the rope barrier, tail trembling. For a half-second, the entire crowd was silent. Then everyone moved at once. Liam was already on his feet. He didn't run. He moved, quickly, efficiently, with the economy of motion of someone trained to enter a situation without escalating it. Scout rose instantly beside him, reading Liam's shift in body language the way he always did, and followed without being told. By the time Liam reached the corridor, Claudette was already into her speech. Something about the judging being irregular. Something about standards. Her voice was tight and controlled in the way voices get when the person speaking knows they've done something wrong and has decided to talk their way past it. Bea's mother was shaking. Bea had her face buried in Rex's neck. Rex was shaking too. The event coordinator, a heavy-set man named Paul, per his lanyard, was standing between Claudette and the family, hands raised, saying something about policies and calm, and let's all just take a moment. No one was taking a moment. Liam stopped a few feet back. He watched. He could feel Scout beside him, reading the scene. Claudette finally noticed them. She looked at Scout first, with the expression of a person who categorized animals as either accessories or inconveniences. And then at Liam. Her eyes moved over his plain gray shirt, his jeans, his face. She saw a man in his 30s with a dog on a lead. She did not see what she should have seen. "This doesn't involve you," she said. Liam looked at Rex. He looked at Bea. He looked at the ribbon on the grass. "You struck someone's dog," he said. Not loud, not aggressive. Just stated. "The judging was compromised," Claudette said. Her voice had the texture of a woman who had spoken to boards of directors and expected to be deferred to. That animal disrupted Versailles during the approach, and the handler failed to manage it. I was correcting. "You hit a child's dog," Liam said. Again, Just a fact. Claudette's jaw tightened. I don't know who you are, but I can tell you that I have already spoken to the event organizers, and this will be reviewed. My husband is a member of the fair's founding committee. That's got nothing to do with what you just did. Something in his voice made her stop. Not the anger. There was no anger in it. It was the stillness. The absolute complete stillness of a man who had held that register under conditions Claudette had never imagined and never would. Scout sat, ears up. Watching her, Claudette looked at the dog, then back at Liam. "Get out of my way," she said. Paul, the coordinator, put a hand on Claudette's arm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to." She shook him off. Turned, began, walking toward the exit path. She walked past her husband, who had appeared at the edge of the crowd with his phone still in his hand. She didn't look at either of them. Liam crouched down. He looked at Rex. The dog was still trembling. A welt was visible across his back, just behind the shoulder blade. Liam rested his hand flat on Rex's side, just rested it there. Steady pressure. Rex's breathing slowed in about 45 seconds. Scout lay down beside them, close but not touching, letting his presence do the work. Bea was watching this. Her eyes were red. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked. "He's going to be fine," Liam said. "He's brave. You can see it." Bea looked at Scout. "Is that your dog?" "That's my partner," Liam said. "There are things that money does to people, not all people, not inevitably. But in some, over enough time, it builds a wall between consequence and action, between what they do and what happens because of it. They begin to believe, without quite thinking it, that the wall is permanent, that the wall is them." Claudette Ashworth had lived behind that wall for a long time. The fair's security team, 2 retired RCMP officers who volunteered at the event every year, arrived within minutes. Paul had already called them. There was a camera mounted on the announcement booth that had captured the full incident. The angle was clear. By late afternoon, the footage was being reviewed by event management. Claudette had returned to the VIP area, where her husband's committee membership guaranteed a certain level of courtesy. She sat with a white wine and spoke quietly into her phone. She seemed, to people passing by, to be perfectly composed. What she didn't know yet was that Bea's mother had already spoken to 2 of those security officers, that Rex's vet, called immediately, had documented the injury, that 3 separate people in the crowd had recorded the incident on their phones, and at least one of those recordings was being shared, that Liam, on his way out with Maeve and Priya, had stopped at the security tent and given a quiet, precise, 2-minute account of exactly what he'd witnessed. No embellishment, no editorializing, just what happened, in order, with timestamps. The older of the 2 security officers had thanked him. "You former military?" the officer had asked. "Current," Liam said. The man nodded like that explained the way Liam spoke. It did. What came next didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived the way most consequences arrive, for people who've spent decades avoiding them, quietly from multiple directions at once, until avoidance was no longer possible. The footage posted 1,000 views the following morning, reached 4. By evening it was 160,000. A local news station in Kelowna picked it up. Then a national outlet. The headline they used was something about entitlement and animal cruelty and a dog show. But the image they chose for the thumbnail was the one from a bystander's phone. Claudette mid-swing, Bea's face visible in the background. Rex caught in the split second before impact. The comments, Liam was told later, were not kind. He hadn't watched. Claudette's husband, whose name appeared on the founding committee of 4 different local organizations, began receiving calls that morning. By midday, 2 of those organizations had issued. By the following day, both had quietly accepted his resignation. Claudette's own business, an interior design firm that serviced high-end residential and hospitality clients across the Okanagan and Lower Mainland, began losing bookings. Not all at once. 1, then 2, then a cluster when a large hotel group in Vancouver quietly declined to renew their seasonal contract. No one issued a statement. No one made a speech. The wall just started developing cracks. And the cracks got wider the way they always do once they start. Animal cruelty charges were filed 4 days later. The documentation from Rex's vet, the camera footage, and the witness statements, including Liam's, made the case straightforward. Claudette's lawyer negotiated. The charge was reduced, as these things sometimes are. But it was on record. And record, as it turned out, was something money couldn't simply make disappear. Liam heard most of this from Priya, who followed the story the way Priya followed everything, with persistent, cheerful attention to detail. She texted him updates from CFB Esquimalt, where he'd returned after his leave week ended. He read them. He didn't respond to most of them. He wasn't indifferent. He just didn't know what to say to news like that. He'd grown up in a family where you did the right thing because it was the right thing, and then you moved on and did the next right thing. There wasn't usually a text chain about it. Scout slept on his regulation mat beside Liam's bunk and didn't ask for commentary either. They were well matched that way. 3 weeks after the fair, a card arrived at the base, forwarded through Priya, who'd forwarded it through the event coordinator, who'd tracked down the right channel through base administration. The envelope was a child's envelope, light purple, slightly crooked where it had been sealed, her name printed in the return address corner in the careful block letters of someone who had recently learned to write in cursive and was proud of it. B. Inside was a card with a drawing on the front. 2 dogs, one big and one medium, rendered in colored pencil with the kind of earnest accuracy that only children put into things they care about. Scout was clearly the bigger one. Brown and black, with careful attention paid to the alert ears. Rex was beside him, first-place ribbon on his collar. Inside, in the same careful cursive, "Dear Liam and Scout, Rex is all better. We went back to training on Tuesday. The vet said the welt healed clean. Mom says I can enter the fall trials in Penticton. I told Rex about Scout. He seemed interested. Thank you for staying." Liam read it twice. He set it on his footlocker. Scout nosed it once, then looked up at him. "Yeah," Liam said. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. There's a thing that happens when you've spent years in environments where everything is uncertain, where the ground beneath you is literally or figuratively unstable, and then you come back to ordinary life. You notice things that most people walk past. You notice the woman at the coffee counter who's smiling, but whose hands are slightly too tense. You notice the man on the bus who's watching the door. You notice the dog at the fair who's trembling, and the child with her arms around him, and the gap between what's happening and what should be done about it. You don't always act. Sometimes the right thing is to stay back. But sometimes you're standing close enough and the moment is clear enough, and there's no calculation required. You just move. Liam moved. Scout moved with him. That's how it had always worked between them. 2 partners, 14 years of training between them. No drama, no performance, just presence, and the willingness to step into a space where someone smaller needed someone steadier. B's cards stayed on the footlock for the rest of Liam's time at the base. Other things accumulated around it, a coffee mug, a folded topo map, the kind of small domestic accumulation that happens in any workspace. But the card stayed. Purple envelope. Careful cursive. 2 dogs in colored pencil. Some things you keep not because you need to be reminded, but because the reminder is for something else, the part of you that sometimes wonders, in the long hours of a deployment or a training rotation, or a sleepless night in a bunk, in a building that smells like diesel and recycled air, whether the ordinary moments matter. They do. The card was evidence. Bea entered the fall trials in Penticton. In September, Rex ran clean. They placed first in his division. Priya texted Liam the photo, Rex with the ribbon, Bea with both arms around his neck, her face buried in his fur, the way children hold the things they love completely, and without reservation. Liam showed the photo to Scout. Scout looked at it for a long moment with the focused, serious attention he gave to everything. Then he turned away and lay back down on his mat. The case was settled. The record was on file. The wall had cracks in it now that wouldn't close. And somewhere in Penticton, a girl and her dog were running. That was enough. That was, if you ask this narrator, exactly enough.